Hello, greetings. Thank you again for listening.
Hello, Internet.
Some call him Timothy Hamner Sr., but today he is
the pastor.
Yep.
And some call him Lyle E. Henderson. But today he is
the Prince.
The Prince.
Yep. You are listening to the podcast, not podcast. That might be something that's coming up in the future, in like 10 years,
think we
another
should
decade.
Start a podcast.
Well, actually, one of our episodes that we do about bodies and fitness and all that, we can call it a podcast.
Yeah, there you go. Rather than having a podcast, that day will be a podcast.
So you'll say that you heard it first. All right,
heard
you'll
it
be
first.
Like, I heard that. I remember that.
Yeah,
you're listening to this podcast, and we are so excited to bring this to you.
Yes. This one's going to be a very interesting topic. Let's just deal with that now.
It is a very important topic. Very
this is
interesting
one that
topic.
Runs into the families.
Before we jump into the topic, though, I do want to do. I have to do all my little commercials and all that stuff. So make sure if you're listening on the format that you're listening to, you can also go to podcast.yahogo.org.
Yes,
that's spelled
podcast.yahogo.org.
CAST dot like a real period.
YAHOGO.org.
Yeah. All right, we're spelling it.
Well, you started spelling it, so I figured
so
follow
true.
the cadence.
It's like the little kid, it's like once you start spelling stuff over their head, and then eventually it's like, okay.
They pick up on it. Yep.
Right. I had somebody who actually spelled for their dog, and the dog started recognizing the words.
No.
The dog started recognizing the letters. Yeah.
Nice.
It was like we're gonna take him for a WALK, and then they started hearing that, and I'm gonna just go ahead. Her name is Tasha. She's a boxer, and she started recognizing
Tasha
that because the wife was saying that just so that she wouldn't get disappointed if the husband said no, not right now. So she wouldn't say the word walk. She said, "Are you going to take Tasha for a WALK?" So Tasha started hearing that and realizing that when the answer was yes, she got to walk out. So now when they started spelling it, she was like, I'm going for a walk.
Wow.
Yeah. Isn't that something?
That's crazy.
So now back to our subject. First of all, before we do that, I want to go back to our commercial. If you'd like to communicate with us on any one of our episodes of the podcast, The Pastor and the Prince, you can email us at podcast@yahogo.org.
And that's podcast@yahogo.org.
That's it.
Yeah,
so now we can jump into...
And you know what? In some cases, if you're catching it on one of those platforms that would allow you to leave comments below, feel free to do that. That's fine as well.
Awesome.
Even if you want to, talk about us and say, you guys are horrible, we'll say thank you and keep it moving.
Awesome. So
criticism is our vitamin B.
Yeah, we like that.
That's how we get better.
Yep.
There you go.
Better. I like that vitamin B for better. I saw what you did there.
He's slow on this stuff, so that's okay.
I'm slow, but I'm steady.
It's just like, you know what? That's good. That's a good one, too.
Marco taught me that.
It's like garbage, just like that one. See, I knew he was going to miss it.
Yeah.
And I sent him the text on that. And I said, you know what?
Okay.
I'm too fast for the guy. So
yeah, you are.
So for the next,
for the next 7 minutes, 6 minutes now, we're going to tell you what this show is going to be about. Because in 6 minutes, we're going to take a break.
You know what's interesting?
Yes, sir.
Maybe we should have said in 30 minutes.
30 minutes?
Because that's going to be a great segue. You remember the cartoons? And anytime they had the poison, they would always do X, X, X.
Yeah.
That's where the 30 comes from.
Right. 30. Gotcha. Okay, so this episode, we're going to talk about pharmaceuticals, the war on drugs.
So we're being polite when we say the word pharmaceuticals. Pharma. Big pharma.
Big pharma.
Oh my goodness. And we're talking about the war on drugs.
Yes.
We'll also talk about prescription drug use. And you know what? We'll have to deal with the other unfortunate side of this, which is overdose.
ODs.
So let's start at the beginning. And this is the one thing I love about when you start things. When you start at the beginning, it's kind of easy to go. For those of you that were wondering, you go to history.com, and it's okay to share who we received this information from, you'll have an idea of how this discussion was really born. Let's see here. History.com, according to the writers there, they say this: drug use for medicinal and recreational purposes has been happening in the United States since the country's inception.
Wow.
In the 1890s, the popular Sears and Roebuck. Now, this is how you know you're old when you remember the Sears and Roebuck catalog.
First of all, if you remember that Sears had an "and" onto it, because there are a lot of us who just know it as Sears.
Correct.
Right. It's just like the K&B was Cass and Best-Off.
There you go.
There was
keep in mind, Sears was a
Woolworths.
National brand, not
like,
a local.
That's true.
Because I'll give you another local name that those of you that might be listening to us from down south, Piggly Wiggly.
Yeah, Piggly Wiggly. Yep,
That's one of those southern delights and treats, but we didn't have a Piggly Wiggly up north. So when they said it, I'd be like, Piggly who? What you call my mama? Anyway, Sears and Roebuck catalog included an offer for a, catch this one, Prince, a syringe and a small amount of cocaine.
Wait a minute.
Coca, baby.
Wait a minute. You're telling me you can buy a syringe in the catalog?
This was in the 1890s now. So this is going back. Now, keep in mind, those of us that were black, we couldn't buy it because we were using the Sears and Roebucks as our tissue. Right. But that's something else. So let's keep it moving here. And that's if they decided to give us the catalog. Otherwise, it was our hands. And anyway, we'll keep this one moving. All right. Amount of cocaine only cost
Somebody might be eating dinner.
Well, if you eating dinner, just wash your hands. The CDC says if you wash your hands for at least 30 seconds, no one should get Omicron. No, they shouldn't get the Corona.
Delta, none of that.
Delta.
But you know what? That brings me to
Lambda.
That brings me to something else that I heard. They said that during the pandemic, most people think that the body part that's been washed the most are the hands during the pandemic, but it's actually the brain.
Interesting.
Washed. Get it? Washed the most.
All right. Washed the most.
Brainwashed.
Yeah. Oh boy.
He didn't get it, y'all. He didn't get it.
I got it. It was just that one was a bad one.
Okay.
If there was an egg, I would have let that one go.
Whatever. Don't throw anything at me. Okay, now back to this.
At that time, cocaine had not yet been outlawed, so that's how you could buy
it was legal.
Cocaine with the syringe, and they said in small amounts for $1.50. In some states, laws to ban or regulate drugs were passed in the 1800s. Whoa. And the first congressional act to levy taxes on morphines and opium took place in the 1890s. Wow. So that's just a primer on this quote-unquote war on drugs. Now, keep in mind, I'm just going to share my ignorance right now. When I first heard that term, the war on drugs, I associated it with Nancy Reagan during the crack epidemic.
Yeah.
When, they were trying to get drugs out of the inner cities. And I think at that time, and I might be wrong. If I'm wrong, somebody please rescue a
podcast
brother.
at yahoo.org.
There you go. That's how you rescue this brother. But I believe that was during the same time of New Jack City. Pookie.
I remember that. Are y'all old enough to know about New Jack City?
And the New Jack swing sound.
The New Jack swing.
Well, it wasn't quite like that. It was more of a tick-tock and you don't stop.
Right. So in 1 minute or less, tell us what it is about this cocaine epidemic that started back in the 1800s.
What was about it? Well, the fact was the amount of people that was using at that particular time. And keep in mind, if I'm ignorant on this, please send me an email. Tell me,
we got it.
Pastor,
we're gonna bombard you.
You're wrong on this one. But I'm going to say it was only available for those who could actually afford it.
Wow.
So I can't say a lot of us.
Wow.
I'm not saying that we could not afford things, but you have to look at the time span. If I'm looking at the 1890s, we weren't free until a few, 100 years maybe later. Yeah. So that means this wasn't even available to us. This was available to those that, either knew about it. You had to be in the know. You either had to be in the grow, because if you're in the growing, then I'm sure you're going to partake in the things that you grew. So,
Right.
That's always a interesting phenomena as
Right,
well.
right.
But what really caught my attention was they said, okay, let's have a war on this. And we're not the ones bringing it in. I'm fast forwarding now to today. And going back even to the New Jack Swing sound, we weren't the ones that was bringing this stuff in.
Right.
That was another group that was bringing it in. And there are certain elements to this story that basically says, hey, this was all potentially government seeded and not necessarily individuals. But I'd love to have your thoughts on that, Mr. Lyle.
But we'll have thoughts after these messages. We'll be right back. Yes, we'll be right back.
High blood pressure, also known as hypertension, is when your blood pressure, the force of the blood flowing through your blood vessels, is consistently too high. High blood pressure is prevalent among African Americans and affects them in unique ways. African Americans develop high blood pressure at younger ages than other groups in the U.S. and are more likely to develop complications associated with high blood pressure. These problems include stroke, kidney disease, blindness, dementia, and heart disease. Why is high blood pressure in African Americans so common? Outside of environmental factors like smoking, obesity, and stress, there exists a little-known genetic theory about why blacks in the Western Hemisphere are especially prone to high blood pressure. In 1991, Thomas W. Wilson and Clarence E. Grimm published a hypothesis titled Biohistory of Slavery and Blood Pressure Differences in Blacks Today. Because the major causes of death for African captives were salt-depletive diseases such as diarrhea, fevers, and vomiting, it is argued that individuals with an enhanced genetic ability to conserve salt had a distinct survival advantage over others and were therefore more likely to bequeath their genotype to subsequent generations of Western Hemisphere blacks. Thus, it is predicted that blacks in the Americas have a greater frequency of individuals with an enhanced genetic-based ability to conserve salt than African blacks. Moreover, it is surmised that this trait is partially responsible for the higher incidence of hypertension today among Western Hemisphere blacks than among African blacks. This is Patrick Sturgis with A World of Black History.
And we're back. You're listening to the Pastor and the Prince podcast.
Pastor and the Prince podcast.
Yep.
And we're talking pharmaceuticals today.
The war on drugs.
And the war on drugs. And here's the part that that just really took my understanding or took me to another level. It wasn't necessarily how the war on drugs started. It was really how the professional use of drugs entered into our lexicon. And I like to say the professional use because when I went to the doctor, what's one of the things that I'm looking for when I go to the doctor? I'm looking for some medication so that it will deal with some of my issues. Here's an interesting quote. Do you have that quote from Russell Brand?
I do have that
What
quote.
is that? What did Russell had something to say
The
about?
priority of any addict
The priority of any addict
is
what?
to anesthetize
Anesthetize
the pain of living to ease the passage of day with some purchased relief.
Wow.
That was Russell Brand on drug abuse.
Russell Brand on drug abuse.
And
what's
there's a term in
interesting
there
is
that we're gonna talk about. There's
what's
a term
that term?
in there. So we're gonna introduce that word because
Go ahead and introduce
some
that word.
people might not
They may
know
not know what that is.
anesthetize
But what's
is.
going to be interesting is I love that purchased relief. And keep in mind, when I go to the doctor, what am I looking for? Some
Purchased
relief. Or I can say purchase relief from the pain that I'm in.
Or
And
insurance covered relief.
Or insurance. There you go, because insurance is supposed to be paying for this stuff. Hello. But I can tell you what opened my eyes to prescription drug use prescription. I love how one artist put it, scription. He write out all of my scriptions. There you go.
Give me all of my medicine in the room.
In the room.
All right,
Come on,
that's on the pastor's part. All right.
There you go.
All right. Now the prince has to bring it right back. I want to introduce this word anesthetize to you.
But before you bring that word anesthetize in, really quickly, what was interesting about that that prescription drug use is when I needed to take some prescription drugs because of a situation at the dentist. I'll tell you that story after you share that word.
Wow, we'll be looking for that story. All right, now listen. Anesthetize. It comes from the word
From the Greek
anesia. Anesthesia.
Or anesthesia.
And the definition is it's a verb. It is has 4 syllables. Anesthetize, right? Anesthetize.
Size.
Right? Anesthetize.
Size.
Ties.
Ties or size?
Ties, like neckties, yeah, but Tize. Okay, so the definition is to administer I'm sorry, let me start over. It's to administer an anesthetic to a person or an animal, especially so as to induce a loss of consciousness. Ooh. So there's a purpose for losing consciousness.
In this particular case.
Yeah, like when you're going into an operation, you don't want to actually see them cut on you.
I have a story on the operation too.
Oh my God, he's got a
funny
story for everything.
that you mentioned
My old neighbor in New Orleans, Victor Johnson, he used to say, all God's children has a story.
Yes.
All God's children have a story.
Yeah. Well, I think that's true because it starts when you're born.
That's very true. That's very
there
true.
you go.
All right, before we run out of...
We're all looking for the book.
He's got everybody laughing. Exactly. Now, before we run out of time, go ahead and tell us that story.
No, just a really quick story. Had to go to the dentist. Had to go there for... Well, actually, I was trying to be Mr. It, i.e. getting some silver fillings taken out and replaced with the brand new porcelain white fillings. Oh. So I allowed the dentist to talk me into doing the entire upper portion of my mouth in one visit. Ooh. Or it might have been the lower part. Either way.
That was brave.
It was just exactly because I didn't know how brave I was being until after I got out of the chair and I couldn't open my mouth.
But I don't understand why the dentist didn't discourage you.
Again, it was one of those things I did not know. But long story short, because I had my mouth open that long under that anesthesia or under the local anesthesia, I ended up with lockjaw. I ended up playing ball with my son a few days later. And as I stated, I was had lockjaw. So that means I was on prescription medication. I'm playing ball with my son. And what happens? Pop goes the Achilles.
Stop.
Yes.
And you didn't feel it, did you?
There you go, because I was on the prescription medication. Yeah. And that's when I learned about things like Vicodin and Percocet and all of that stuff because I was already a muscle relaxer. Go ahead.
Well, let me tell you, I went to the dentist and because I didn't have any of this stuff in my system, my system didn't know how to respond to it. I remember going to the dentist, and this is a very true story. My church members in New Orleans.
I hope it's a true story.
Oh my God.
This is a very true story.
A very, very true
story.
As
if it was a non-fictional story, but continue.
No, fictional. Yeah. So that's
why I said non-fictional.
Right. My church members in New Orleans, we had all gone out to dinner, and I had gone to the dentist and had taken some pain medicine, and I was hallucinating. I was actually seeing things and imagining things that weren't there. And so one of my church members, I'm not even going to say her name, but I scared her so badly.
Poor baby.
Because the apostle was visiting, and Apostle Martin was visiting, and I had convinced her that they were trying to kill him and told her that they shouldn't take the interstate leaving the restaurant because they were trying to kill him. People were trying to kill him. And she didn't know that I was on this medication. She knew that I was actually, like I would say stuff and she could believe what I said because I wasn't going to clown about stuff like that.
Because you were trustworthy.
Yeah. And so they had to tell her,
and little did
she had tears
know.
in her eyes, and they had to take her aside and say, hey, listen, he took some medicine and he's hallucinating.
And he's not right.
Yeah, from then on, they started telling me to cut it in half.
So when did you get off the medication?
Shortly after that. And when it wore off, I didn't take it anymore.
Are you sure you're not off of it?
You know what? Really? Okay, now back to our.
So all of this was a big hallucination for.
Back to our podcast. Back to our podcast. You're listening to The Pastor and the Prince.
Here's another one. This is a quippy one, though.
All right.
Quitting smoking is easy. I've done it 100 times, says
Exactly.
Mark Twain.
Exactly. Yeah, that's like somebody saying, you got a smoking problem. It's like, no, I don't have a problem with it at all.
I don't have a problem with it, that the smoke does, but
Yep. Oh, stop it. That's his favorite sound effect now, y'all.
hey, there you go.
But listen, there's a couple of other things. You talked about where it started, and
Yes.
I want to know if our listeners actually, I'm wondering if you knew that cocaine was found in the recipe for Coca-Cola.
Yes.
That's actually a true story.
That's a true story.
That's an actual true story.
Yes.
It's a very true story.
Now, let me ask you this. Do you know the bottle, the shape of the bottle, where that came from?
I don't know where the shape of the bottle came from.
Yes. If you
It looks like an hourglass.
it does look like an hourglass, but if you keep thinking about it just a little bit longer, because I think you're going to read about where, that came from in the story. Go ahead and read the story, and then I'm going to tell you.
This is an article that was written by Sarah Bellum, and
Thanks, Sarah.
This is the National Institute for Drug Abuse, and she said Coca-Cola was invented in 1885 by John Pemberton, a pharmacist from Atlanta, Georgia, who concocted the original formula in his backyard.
Wow.
Pemberton's recipe contained cocaine. That's right. The recipe for Coca-Cola contained cocaine in the form of an extract of the coca leaf. Coca leaf.
So you got the coca leaf. No, that's fine.
The coca leaf, which inspired the coca part of the beverage's name. The cola in the name comes from the cola nut, which contains caffeine, another stimulant. All right. So all these stimulants were in this
nut. If you've ever seen a photo of that cola nut, you now seen a photo of the Coca-Cola bottle that was later used from the coconut prototype.
Oh.
And that's why I wanted you to finish the story, because I didn't know if you knew that or not.
I didn't know that. Thank you so much. Now, the more you know, the more you grow.
The more you grow.
Yeah, there you go. Now, the last part of this article says, the last part of this, the beginning of the article, because I'm only reading an excerpt of the article because we have to go to a break in a minute.
Those breaks,
at the time, I know, we got to take breaks. At the time of Coca-Cola's invention, cocaine was legal. And
yes, it was.
And it was a common ingredient in medicines. It was thought not to be harmful in small doses. Yep, the cola nut. Wow, it looks like a Coca-Cola bottle.
It does.
Y'all need to look that up. Y'all need to look that up.
Just look up coca
search,
and then the word nut. Now keep in mind, coconut, the ingredient will pop up if you're in Google, but just take off the rest of the ingredients and leave it with coconut, and you'll see it there. I'll say this: it looks almost like larvae, as if it's some type of butterfly trying to come out of a shell.
Well, actually, that's what happens with drug abuse. A lot of times, it's like this larvae, and you don't know the harm of it. I always say that
until you partake.
I always say that drug dealers are probably the best salespeople on the face of the earth, because how do you sell a person who has a wonderful family, wonderful job, wonderful everything going on? How do you sell them the idea that they can take this drug? But I think it goes back to anesthetizing, because sometimes there are people who are going through so much in our society
so large
that they want to
try.
They want to lose consciousness. Different. They want to lose consciousness and awareness of what is going on in their daily life.
They're doing that to numb
the pain. Exactly.
Of what comes with life.
Exactly.
And little did they know that, guess what? After your numb wears off, guess what? You need to go back and renumb.
Yeah, the pain comes back. It's still there. It never went anywhere.
And unfortunately, that's what could lead to potential overdose. And
because the addiction comes there.
The addiction is the piece. And you have to realize all of the things in the brain are still working.
Yeah.
When you get that feel good, you get that hit of dopamine or the cortisone or the synapses which is within the brain talking to the other sections of the brain that says record this, which is the hippocampus and the amygdala. They're recording that good time. So now they're seeking out that good time because of what that thing did in their body, which was that feel-good mechanism that they turn on. And unfortunately, depending on the genes and how the person's and family genes are set up will depend on if they're one of those that unfortunately gets hooked on some of these pharmaceuticals.
Now
Whether
you
it's-
talked about the brain. There's one thing that I wanted to share because
and it sounds like we better do it before the commercial break. Because
because we're gonna have to wrap this up. Our podcast is almost over on this episode of Pharmaceuticals, the War on Drugs. But listen, drugs can permanently change the brain's prefrontal cortex. This area of the brain helps you think ahead, make smart decisions, interact with others in healthy ways, and control yourself. When a team uses certain drugs, their brain will fail to develop properly in these areas.
In those areas.
I knew about that because I did have a family member who actually was dealing in drugs, and some of their maturity level stopped. And so I wanted to bring that out, is that there are some things that happen to the brain when you use drugs. And one of the things I wanted to say is that my mother was talking about this recently, where she was prescribed some medication to prevent something else from happening because she had some symptoms that may have looked like a stroke and so forth. So she was taking this medicine and she looked at the side effects. She started reading the side effects, and guess what? She was taking something to prevent something, and the side effects was saying it was no. The side effects was saying that it would cause that actual thing.
Oh wow, great! Yeah.
Well, they did say may. Let me just be
they'll always
fair.
say may.
Right.
But
let me be fair.
And
then one of the things she said, it may cause strokes, heart attacks, or death.
Bingo.
And she was like, I'm not taking this.
Something that's going to cause death. But if you listen to some of these commercials that are peddling these pharmaceuticals, when you listen to them do the fast gargle talk, a lot of times that's what they're saying. This, especially if don't get me started.
That's like when I was working in chemistry around the labs years ago at the university, at Loyola University in New Orleans, chemistry department. Nice. And I was I had a dictionary of all the chemicals, and I wanted to figure out exactly what was in aspartame. And so I started looking up aspartame. And so I had a chemist who actually helped me to break down every little thing. So we started breaking it down, looking for the definitions of that particular chemical, looking for that, of that ingredient.
And what did you find?
It got all the way down. Well, number one, I found out it was a part of the aspartame ingredients are paint thinner. So yes,
Jeez.
Exactly. So that's why I don't normally do diet gum. I don't normally do diet drinks, those kind of things, because they have aspartame in them. And then the other thing is that
but they say light traces.
I know that's the same thing they said about, but that's the same thing they said about cocaine.
There you go.
It was considered harmful in small doses. Well, here's the other thing that kind of scared me.
As you said, the flip side.
Here's the other thing that really deterred me from doing it altogether, because I looked, and then there was a chemical that was undefined that said harmful if swallowed. It was in there. It was one of the ingredients in there that was undefined, unnamed. It just said harmful if swallowed.
And I love when you say undefined. It's just unnamed. They know what it is. They just didn't want to tell you what the name was.
They do.
Yeah, come on now. Somebody knows something.
All right, listen. We've got to take a break, and then we'll be back to wrap this up. To talk about this episode of Pharmaceuticals. You're listening to the Pastor and the Prince podcast. And we're back. Thank you so much for listening. We've had a wonderful time talking about these things again. It feels like the times
are going just a lot faster.
They do go faster.
It's like, wow, man.
It's because the 21st century goes by faster than the 18th century.
That's one way of looking at it. That's one way.
Or actually, when you get to be a half a century, when you're in your 50s, then things start to seem like they speed up. It's like, whoa, wait a minute. I want to be 30 again. I want to be 40 again. I think
that happened when you turned 13. Life was slow until you hit 13, and next thing you know, you're graduating. Next thing you know, you're 25.
You know
next
what?
thing you know, you're 35.
I thought that age was 17.
40.
I
think so?
Yeah, because it's like at 15, 16, you're really enjoying it. You're really not thinking about it. It's just like that part of the brain that develops, and you're thinking ahead, and you're rationalizing things. And then
cortex.
all of a sudden, you're 17. You're like, oh, next year I'm graduating. Oh, next year I got to decide whether or not I'm going to a trade school or go to college, or I'm going to the military, or I got to figure out what I'm going to do because my parents are going to kick me out and make that room a sewing room.
Yeah, for me, it was just the 13 was the bar mitzvah time.
Ah, gotcha.
Yeah,
gotcha.
so it was
That's
like
true.
everything else from there was like,
Very true.
You're a man. Boom. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And keep in mind, I was actually working then too. I was actually one of the, I guess, rare 13-year-olds at that particular time that actually had a real job with a real W-2 and W-4 and filing taxes that year. So that part was interesting.
And if you are listening, or if you're listening and you are a teenager, or if you're listening and you're a parent of a teenager, I hope this episode has really helped you to understand the negative impact that pharmaceuticals can have on you.
That they can have. They do have positive
there are positives.
things, and I'll give you one, the torvastatin. From what I was told, if you take one of those,
torvastatin.
I'll just refer to it as a statin.
Okay.
A statin drug, and you'll, for those that have high blood pressure
gotcha.
or pre-diabetic, you'll know what I'm talking about. But I learned the hard way that could cause potentially liver damage.
Wow.
So I wanted to get off of it because I'm like, if I can exercise my way out and eat right, I'd prefer to do that than to take those pills the rest of my life.
I love what you just said, because some people think that there's no alternative to them fixing their problem. It has to be pharmaceuticals. But guess what?
You can eat
Guess
right.
what? Yep. You can actually exercise and eat yourself out of a health problem. That's right. Or health issue.
I guess we'll have to have that on a future show.
Absolutely.
To really find out the science and the balance, because I'm going to tell you, your height is going to play a role in this. Your age is going to play a role in this. Your weight is going to play a role in this, and your psychological makeup.
Yeah.
Because a lot of these things happen and start in the brain. Where we talked about, if you have that cognitive control of your brain, and you're able to, as they say, influence your attention to make sure you're focused on the right things versus on the wrong things. I can tell you.
Yes. Well, the clock has flipped, and I just want to
flapped as well.
Yeah, it has, and I want to thank you, because during this episode, I'm hopeful that we have broadened your horizon and heightened your awareness on the war on drugs.
And you know what? Today was just a seed.
Yeah,
because we didn't even go into detail on this stuff.
Not
even with the scientific terms. We just really spoke.
You can't do it justice in 30 minutes, though.
Not in 30 minutes. No.
But hopefully we've heightened your awareness on the war on drugs, on the problems and issues and the ongoing issues that we have with prescription drug abuse.
Got to get that out.
Prescription drug use. There we go.
Drug use.
And another issue that still plagues us is ODs. So I really appreciate you. We really appreciate you listening.
Thank you for listening.
Please reach out to us. Let us know that you are listening. Let us know your ideas. If you have an idea for a show, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah.
And
we love to try it too.
Yes, podcast.yahogo.org.
Podcast.yahogo.org.
Right. And the email is very similar. It just has an @ instead of a dot. So it's podcast@yahogo.org.
You have been listening to The Pastor
and the Prince.
Thank you for listening. Until we chat next time with the internet.
Be well.